When Jesus spoke and the ancients spoke, they were not necessarily looking at things literally. They wanted to make a point, and they did it through stories and myths and such as that. So that's part of what we're looking at. What is the story? What is the point? What is it that Jesus wants to know with these great statements? So as you know, if you were here last month, he said to turn the other cheek. If somebody hits you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek, which means you're looking at them, if you're looking at this literally, you're looking at them and saying, oh, you got this one? I got that one. Or if we're looking today, because the same story tells the same thing, the same verse does. If somebody makes you go a mile, say, what the heck? Piece of cake. Let's go too. Now, in real life, if you're looking at such things, that's not the way that works. If somebody whacks you, what do? You whack them back, and then they whack you, and then you whack them, and then they whack you, and so forth. And if you say to somebody, when he makes you go another mile that you hadn't planned on, you say, the heck with this, I didn't want to do that, I'm out of here. So you continue the dismay. And what is really wanted here is not literally looking at these things, but what is it they tell us? And what they tell us is to change the action, to change your mind about the way you've done everything. See, what we normally do is continue to do things the way we have always done them. And he's saying, don't do that. He's saying, do something different. In his commentaries, he has said, return good for evil, which is another way of saying, do something different. Don't continue on the same track that you've done all along, because it's not working. You perpetuate the same problems. Now, today I brought a talk that I call Buried Treasure. And we can only look at buried treasure if we have the free and generous mind, because it's the free and generous mind that lets us change the action, change our minds. In fact, John just had a great statement he put up there, which we use in the science of mind all the time. Change your thinking, change your life. And the idea is that we can change our thinking. A lot of people think they are stuck in the ways they've always thought because they're caught in something that I call habits. I brought it to you last time I was here. Habits, attitudes, opinions, and behaviors. These run the subconscious content of the mind. We intentionally want to do things differently sometimes when we're really thinking about things. But sometimes it's difficult to do that because the subconscious content is already full of ways of doing things that says no. We're not doing it that way. We're going to do it the way we have always done it. So I want to look today with you at buried treasure. And when we think of buried treasure, what comes to mind? The one that comes to mind is one of the latest Indiana Jones movies. You remember that wonderful cave that was just full of jewels and golds and caskets of diamonds and rubies and emeralds and such as that? Whenever you hear buried treasure, that's what comes to mind. And you think, pirates have stolen this. Maybe Captain Morgan, maybe even the Queen's own pirate, Sir Francis Drake. Because among other things, he was a pirate. And we consider them stashed in a secret place where they're going to come and get them later. Well, what I'm thinking about when I think of buried treasure is a treasure of the mind. What is buried there? What things are on hand for us to pull up, and what things keep coming up whether we want them to or not? Because a lot of the treasures is not very cool. Some of it's beautiful. There are treasures of the mind that are like gems and like jewels. Those are the parts of us that we've learned, for instance. We've learned skills. They live in the mind, and we pull them up as we need them. We have beautiful memories about certain things that we have done. We have wonderful people who've been in our lives that we really love, and that we can pull up thoughts of them on a regular basis. So those are some of the lodged, buried treasures that work for us. But mostly, the buried treasures that get us are habits, attitudes, opinions, and behaviors that keep running our lives. And for the most part, unless you're in a work or unless you're in a situation that tells you to take thought, continue to take thought anew, where you're mixing up ideas and thinking up stuff and going back and forth with other people and say, how about this, how about that? Unless we're doing that, for the most part, we live our lives on automatic pilot. Habits, attitudes, behaviors, and so forth run our lives without our having to take much thought. You know what I'm talking about. You don't have to think about getting dressed in the morning or getting in your car and going someplace, although maybe we ought to from time to time. But at any rate, most of the day is run by these things. And that part's okay as long as we're not imposed upon by some of the buried treasure that comes up to interfere with the day. The pirates not only steal treasure, but the pirates of the mind can steal the day from us, because they can steal the day by overlaying it with all the stuff in the mind that says, no, 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 you cannot do this. I have the privilege of dealing with lots of people, and there are some people who start from this day and go forward. They never look much back into the past. They're just not like that. But on the other hand, there are people for whom the past never leaves. No matter what's taking place today, no matter what the possibility is, no matter what the potential is, every day is new, you know. Every day is a surprise. It's new. We have no idea what's going to happen unless it's overlaid by all the stuff in the past that has been a problem. My father and mother should have done this. I missed this chance. I was cheated out of this. This never should have happened. This should have happened, and so on and so forth. That comes up to overlay the day with all those things that are awful and terrible. Jack Canfield came to the church while I was minister in Oakland, and he gave a beautiful workshop on, of course, the things of the mind. And one of the things he said, which I never did forget, he says, we have two elements of memories. He said, we have a pile over here of failures, problems, pains, anguish, heartbreak, sadness, dismay, distrust, anger, and so forth and so on. And over here, we have the remembrances of all the wonderful things that have happened, the skills that we know, the lessons we have learned, the people that we love and have loved. We have all of these. He said, why is it we always go here instead of there? Why is it we always go back to the hard stuff instead of go visit the wonderful things of the mind? And I thought about that ever since. Now, I'm sure the sociologists have doped this all out. They know about this, but I don't. Because I think, what is it? What is it? Is the hard stuff more interesting? Is there more life in it? Is there more heat in it? Is there more blood? Is there more tears? Is it seductive? Is it like a lover? Does it take you in because there's something about that that keeps us there instead of referring to the places in us where the great successes and delights and joys are? That bears thinking about. It really does. And I was thinking about this when I was putting this together, about the fact that some of the buried treasure in our mind isn't even ours. It's stuff that's been given to us. Family stories, cultural stories. Well, just a while back here we had another documentary, more or less, on the Hatfields and the McCoys, the family in West Virginia that shot each other up. So that someone would shoot, and the other family would kill, and they'd come back, and they'd come back. And finally, as it started to move through the generations, it fell to people who never even had the memories, never even participated. And when I think about some of these things, I think about something that George W. Bush said. Now, we're not going to get political, I promise. I'm just picking out a sentence. I'm making a point here. He had talked to the two houses of Congress, and somewhere in this conversation, he brought up a sentence in which the word was contained, crusade. Well, you know, code words do different things. We all know that. And I thought to myself when I heard that, does anybody vet his speeches? And I thought, of course. This was not indeliberately. He meant to say this. And I'm not sure exactly what the reason was altogether behind it, because when code words like that come up, for instance, they irritate and anguish all kinds of Jews and Muslims who go back 1,200 years to the Crusades and remember them all over again, even though they couldn't possibly have any real memories. They have inherited memories. They have given memories. So I tell you this because it may be important enough to know that maybe some of the things we carry around aren't even ours. Maybe they belong to other people, family members, things like that. And they're taking up mind space that they have no business taking up. So these two are considerations, things to think about. But I'm thinking, every single day, I look at oneness. I always come from the premise of oneness. As a retired minister of religious science, which is a metaphysical system, we move in oneness. All metaphysics is like that. There may be differences in the ways that they express their belief systems, but they stand on the idea of oneness. All things are bound together in the one. The presence of God flows in and through each one. As the psalmist said, we live and move and have our being in God. This, I think, is the biggest description of who and what we are. Therefore, everything it is connected. It could not be disconnected. The disconnects only occur because we make them. We decide that we're okay and other people aren't because we simply don't know them. But the thing is, if we're one, there is a deep connection. And I've heard other people say in interviews and such things that if we once talked to people that we did not know, the fear and the hatred would leave because we then knew them, which makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. So what we could do is let the day be new again. We could greet each day anew. Do we get out of bed? What's that old song? I got out of bed and it says, good God morning. Or do we get out and say, good morning, God? We have the choice of how to get out of bed. Or whatever it is, if we have night duty, I guess it's going to do whatever we do at night, it depends. But whatever it is that we activate our day, we have the choice of how we're going to look at the day and how we're going to greet that. And a lot of times, we greet this with what I call default settings. Now, I'm barely computer literate. I couldn't do this stuff in a million years. It's a good thing John's doing it. But I can get up there, I can get emails, I can do manuscript work, I can save stuff, I can even send stuff, so. So I can do a few things. But what I do know is that when I get into the computer, I get into the program where I can do some manuscript work, it immediately defaults to the setting that I need and want. If I want to change the setting, I have to go in and make a difference, make a change, so that it will go there. Now, if I want to make a permanent change in the default setting, I have to go in even farther and say, stop here every time now. Now, I bring this up because the mind is like this. The mind has default settings. When we start the day, or when we start whatever, there's a default setting that we go to, depending on where it is that we are. And if it's in a situation that we're not too sure about, we can default to fear, anger, dismay, and we can start running the little stuff that we do all the time to either get ourselves out of it or to make it less or do whatever we need to do so that we can get through this without resetting the default setting. So there may be something in us that has to say, I'm not going to go there anymore. I do not choose to be upset the minute I hit the floor. I swear, I know people who get up and see how fast they can be offended. And religious scientists are among the most offendable people I know. Sensitive people Everything bugs them. And so they default to that. Or people who have a particular kind of heartbreak or sorrow. And sometimes there is that. There's loss in people's lives that they never get over. Now there are some things that leave and things are never the same again. I understand that. I understand loss, I understand death, I understand these things. But I also know that it is in the nature of us to be happy again. And I have been able to talk with people who have had terrible losses of children, and say with them, I know you don't believe me today, and you can't believe me today, but put in your invisible pocket that one day you will be happy again. And guess what? They are. Unless they work really hard to stay upset, or mad, or angry, or vengeful, or whatever it might be. So we could change all those settings. And what about, just for fun, what about if we made some new ones? What might they be? What might we do if we made buried treasure differently? One, for instance, a treasure of expectations. To get up with expectation. This is old religious science, this is not big stuff, it's not new. But to get up with the idea that something is abreast for us, something is happening. And what I brought here last month and probably bring every time I come, one of my favorite statements is to be open to good. What if we simply elected to be open to good when we started whatever part of the day we started? That automatically, we're talking about the mind, we're talking about the brain, that automatically opens some circuits to let in what the infinite always has. Think of what oneness means. If we use the mind of God, it means that what the mind of God has is always lying in wait, always ready to come forth through us. The only thing that keeps it away is ourselves that say in some form, no, no, no. Whatever that may take, maybe anger, maybe all kinds of things. But what it acts as, no, no, no. So the openness to good kind of begins to push that aside. This takes a little time sometimes. It's not always easy, but you can do it. You can do it. I've done it before. And what about the treasure of self-acceptance, warts and all? You have no idea of how many people think there is something the matter with them. I have had the privilege of dealing with a lot of people from all kinds of walks of life. And I'm telling you, this notion of there's something the matter with me goes across all the lines of status. It's not just people who are having problems or people who have difficulties. It can be people in great place. In fact, I had the opportunity a few years ago of going to a big church in downtown Oakland to listen to a very high-placed religious churchman. I think he was a bishop in the Episcopal Church or some such other thing. And he, at this point in his life, he had also gotten next to Buddhism. So he'd been studying Buddhism, which gave him a different look about himself. And he said earlier in his life, he didn't want people to get close to him because he thought if they really knew me, they wouldn't like me. And I thought, what? This guy is a big honcho. What is the matter with this picture? That he should not have a different thought about himself. But even through all that he had done, there it was. So there can be a place, a treasure, a new treasure of self-acceptance. Whatever, however, if we're one with God, if we're one with the divine presence, we've got to be spiritual. I mean, folks, we are not going to be any more spiritual than we are now. We are not going to be any more spiritual than the day we were born. We're not going to be any more spiritual than the day we take our last breath. But the thing is, we can use it. We can learn what it is. We can use it. We can be more facile with this. We can be more accepting. I mean, a lot of times we have to self-correct. Sure, I know that. Sometimes we do a lot of stupid stuff. But that doesn't mean it's terminal. By any means. And that doesn't mean we can't self. In fact, we can self-correct every single day. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's little. But if we self-corrected every single day, we could cook right along and do all kinds of stuff without all of these pirates stealing the day, covering over the potential with the things that are remembered that we have to pull up. And how about the treasure of release? I mean, finally, letting some stuff go, the past. The past gives you thickness, you know that. It lets us know that it's brought us to where we are. But as I said last time I was here, we can use it as a stepping stone. We don't have to fall over. And we can do that so that whatever it is that's working us. Now, you know what I mean when I say things that are working us? When I was a kid in San Francisco, I grew up in San Francisco, and there were some very well-known sourdough bread places in San Francisco. And I don't know what they do now. Maybe they do something different. But at that time, I was aware that whenever they made a batch of sourdough bread, there's this mystical, alchemical working that takes place in the dough when you put yeast in and other good stuff. It gets in there and it magically changes the dough and makes it sour so that it has this wonderful bread. And what they used to do when they had a new batch of bread coming, they would take a starter. They would take a little piece out of the old batch and put it into the new batch so it would start the same working, which is fine for sourdough bread, not for minds, not for the inner mind. If there is stuff, ideas, possibilities, repeated things, repeated patterns that don't serve, maybe these are things that need to stop working us. Maybe we've done with them long enough. And I'm telling you that you can make changes. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how old you are. You can make changes any time you like. You can change your mind about yourself any time you like. And the law of mind will say yes to you. Part of what Jesus was doing, although he didn't put it that way, but in classic metaphysics, we're looking at how the law of mind works. And when you make a change in what you do and how you think, the law of mind says yes to that. Whatever you're doing, it says yes to it. It says, if you're going around saying, I'm not good, I'm not good, I'm not good, it says, yes, you're not good. But if you change your mind about that, it starts to change its action toward you. This is the nature of a part of the infinite mind. We know this much about that. Not necessarily how or why, but we know this much about it. So we're looking at part of what we're doing here is changing the action of the law of mind. So it says yes, yes, yes to good things. Yes, yes, yes to the things that we would like to see in action. Yes, yes, yes. And just to begin, or to stop with, finally with what I'm doing here, how about the treasure of trusting in the presence? If we live and move in the one, how about we trust it to have our backs, to know us as a part of itself, to secure us, support us, inspire us, guide us, heal us, to reveal itself through us in all the patterns that are there in a place that is as whole as possible. If we will take away all of the things that we have impeded the workings of the mind, it has a better shot through us. It heals better. It inspires better. It moves us along. You can get so that you can say, I anticipate the presence this day, or I accept it, or I trust it to move me along. And you do this enough, and you can feel it during the day. Not necessarily big stuff. You don't necessarily get a thunderbolt to the mind. But you could, but normally not that way. It just kind of moves you along on a regular basis, and you get so you can feel it. You can sense it. This is making new treasure. This is making buried treasure that's really going to work for you. So will you say together with me, I change my thinking, I change the action in my life, and so it is.